case we have never met, I'm Michael Price, and I want to help you succeed in growing your business.
Welcome to the deep dive, everybody. So to start us off today, I want you to imagine you're about to sign a 10-year lease on your absolute dream apartment.
Okay, sounds good so far.
Right. You've got the deposit, the landlord loves you, the background check is flawless, everything is lined up perfectly, but there's one catch.
There's always a catch.
Always. So, your government ID expires in 9 years. Now, in a logical world, you would just sign the 10-year lease and, simply renew your ID when year 9 rolls around.
Yeah, that's just normal life.
Exactly. But in this scenario, the landlord looks at your ID, shakes their head, and says, sorry, because this background document expires in 9 years, you have to go back to the DMV today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you have to throw this perfectly good ID in the trash and apply for a brand new one from scratch just to sign this lease.
That is just incredibly frustrating to even think about.
Right, you're standing there thinking, this is insane, it's just a bizarre bureaucratic nightmare. But the crazy thing is, right now, the United States government is basically doing exactly this to private contractors.
They really are. It's a massive issue.
Yeah, they're forcing them to tear up perfectly good long-term agreements because of this mathematical glitch in how two separate timelines interact.
And we are talking about billions of dollars here.
Exactly. So today, for you listening, our mission is to look at a stack of notes and articles detailing this massive hidden gear in the machinery of the U.S. government, the Federal Supply Schedule contract, in essence.
That's the FSS.
Right. We're going to see how a recent attempt to fix the procurement rules accidentally created a looming paperwork disaster, and we'll look at a proposed fix called Evergreen contracts. So, looking at the sheer scale of the federal supply chain, is this apartment lease analogy really an accurate reflection of what's happening?
I mean, honestly, it mirrors the structural absurdity of the situation incredibly well. The stakes are just, infinitely higher than a single apartment lease.
Because it's not just rent, it's federal infrastructure.
Right? We are talking about taxpayer dollars and the essential supply lines that keep federal agencies functioning, everything from cloud computing to emergency medical supplies.
Oh, wow. So it's really everything.
Everything. And the core illogic is the exact same. Contractors are being locked out of the market or forced into incredibly expensive, redundant application processes.
Just because of how two different procurement timelines clash on paper.
Exactly. It's purely a paperwork clash.
Okay, so we know the federal supply schedule is essentially like the government's Amazon Prime, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's the pre-vetted catalog agencies used to buy what they need.
Right, but usually when we talk about government paperwork, the story is just, a complaint that it's old and slow.
Sure, the classic red tape complaint.
But reading through the research for today, this current nightmare actually started with a massive attempt to make things faster and more efficient. I mean, we need to talk about the Revolutionary FAR Overhaul.
Yeah, the RFO. To understand the trap we're in right now, you really have to look at the very good intentions that built it.
It was supposed to be a good thing.
It was. The RFO was essentially a massive cleanup operation for federal procurement rules. For years, the rules governing how the government buys things into the FSS were housed in a notoriously complex section of the General Federal Rule Book.
Right? The old FAR 8.4 regulations. And I imagine it wasn't exactly light reading.
Far from it. I mean, it was a dense thicket of regulations. It confused both the agencies trying to buy things and the contractors trying to sell them.
So what did the RFO actually do to fix that?
Well, they did something structurally brilliant. They took the rules out of that massive generic federal playbook and moved them into the specific playbook of the agency that actually runs the program.
Which is the General Services Administration, right? The GSA.
Exactly. They moved it to GSAR subpart 53.87100.
Rolls right off the tongue.
Right? But the GSA has exclusive statutory authority over the program, so aligning the rules with the agency in charge just made legal and structural sense.
And the actual text of the rules got a massive haircut in the process, didn't it? Because the numbers in the report are just staggering.
Oh, they really are.
They took the regulatory word count down from almost 9,500 words to just over 2,300 words.
Which is roughly a 75% reduction in sheer red tape.
That's huge. That's a massive win for plain language.
It really was. They stripped out overly complex guidance. They deleted a ton of redundant rules that were already covered by standard contract clauses.
So the goal was to just make things simpler.
Simpler, clearer, promote innovation, and ultimately drive faster, better commercial solutions for the government.
Okay, so that all sounds great, but where did it go wrong?
Well, one of the most impactful changes they made within this newly streamlined rulebook was removing the old 5-year time limit on blanket purchase agreements.
Okay, blanket purchase agreements, BPAs. We know these are the government's favorite tool for bulk buying long-term services.
Yes, agencies love them.
But why did removing the 5-year cap on them suddenly become the catalyst that broke the machinery?
So think about why an agency uses a BPA in the first place. Say an agency knows they're going to need a continuous stream of a specific service.
Like cybersecurity monitoring or maybe facility maintenance.
Exactly. Over the next several years, instead of negotiating a brand new contract every single time they need a monthly report or a server update, they set up a long-term agreement.
Okay, an overarching agreement with a trusted contractor.
Right? It allows agencies to aggregate their needs. And when you group all that buying power together, you leverage it for much better pricing.
So it's basically like buying in bulk at Costco, but for IT modernization over a decade.
Yeah, it's like Costco. But imagine if Costco also locked in your supply chain and protected your pricing model against inflation for a decade.
Okay, I would definitely sign up for that membership.
Right? Because the government isn't just buying in bulk, they are buying predictability. They're securing a reliable partnership.
And it sounds like it works beautifully based on the numbers.
It does. The data shows that BPAs are a dominant force in federal spending. Over the last 5 years, they've accounted for over 50% of the dollar volume of all FSS sales.
Wow, over 50%.
Yeah. Last year alone, in 2024, BPA obligations peaked at over $27.3 billion. That's 52.72% of sales.
27.3 billion? I mean, that is a massive portion of the federal budget moving through this specific contracting vehicle.
Precisely why the timeline change was so monumental. Under the old rules, an agency could only set up a BPA for a maximum of 5 years.
Okay.
But the architects of the RFO realized that artificially limiting these agreements to 5 years was just creating unnecessary administrative cycles, so they removed the cap.
Oh, I see. So suddenly agencies had the freedom to establish their own ordering periods.
Exactly, and naturally wanting to reduce their own administrative workload of constantly recompeting these massive agreements, agencies immediately started shifting toward 10-year BPAs.
Wait, okay. So if the government removed the 5-year limit to let agencies make 10-year BPAs, their goal was to reduce the agency's administrative burdens. They wanted to do the paperwork once a decade instead of twice. But if you're just stretching the timeline to avoid doing the paperwork, didn't they just shift the burden somewhere else?
Yes, that is exactly what happened.
Can you connect the dots between this new freedom for the agencies and, the disaster for the contractors?
They didn't eliminate the friction, they just moved it. And this brings us to the unintended consequence of the overhaul, the contractual gap.
The contractual gap. Let's dig into that.
So the problem stems from one specific new rule that was written into the plain language update, GSAR 53 8.71041.
Another catchy title.
Yeah, but the rule basically states that an agency can only set up a long-term BPA if the contractor's underlying master contract has enough time left on the clock to cover the entire duration of that new BPA.
Wait, I need to make sure the mechanics of this are perfectly clear for us. An underlying FSS contract, like the big foundational master contract a company signs to even get into the catalog, that usually lasts for 20 years, right?
That's the standard structure, yes. It's awarded for an initial base period of 5 years, and then it has 3 consecutive 5-year option periods.
So if you perform well, the government exercises the option and you get another 5 years, up to 20 years total.
Exactly, up to a total of 20 years.
So an agency comes along and says, "We love your work. We want to give you a 10-year BPA for this massive new project."
Right, a great day for the contractor.
But according to this new rule, if the contractor is going to accept that 10-year BPA, their underlying 20-year master contract must mathematically have at least 10 years left on its own clock.
You've got it. The master contract's expiration date must extend past the final day of the proposed 10-year BPA.
Okay, it's like signing a star player to a 20-year contract, but telling them that if they want to play in any championship games that take longer than a week, they have to rip up their contract and retry out for the team in year 9.
That is a perfect analogy. It effectively turns a 20-year agreement into a 9-year one.
Because you're pausing a decade-long project simply because a piece of background paperwork has a different expiration rhythm.
The math is just brutal and uncompromising.
Yeah.
Because of the widespread shift to 10-year BPAs, Any contractor who is in year 11 or year 12 or 15 of their master contract is automatically disqualified.
Just legally locked out from competing for these new agreements.
Completely. They simply don't have 10 years left on their foundational clock. Doesn't matter if they are the absolute best company for the job.
Or if they offer the lowest price to the taxpayer.
Doesn't matter. The timeline disqualifies them.
So to remain competitive in the market, a company in year 11 is forced to prematurely throw away their current perfectly functioning contract and submit an entirely new offer from scratch.
Yep. They essentially have to win a brand new 20-year contract every 9 years just to stay eligible for the big jobs.
And that is the contractual gap.
That's it. A 20-year contract becomes a 9-year contract if you actually want to win any long-term business.
When you hear that a single paperwork glitch like this could derail a multi-billion-dollar supply chain, you really have to wonder what this actually looks like on the ground.
It's not pretty.
I mean, we aren't just talking about filling out a change of address form here. What does this administrative friction actually cost the system?
It is a staggering drain on resources. Submitting an offer for a new FSS contract is a monumental undertaking.
What are they actually having to do?
Well, a company has to pull their top engineers, their pricing analysts, and their legal teams off actual billable work to spend months drafting a proposal.
Just months of lost productivity.
Yeah, they have to submit massive amounts of historical pricing data, undergo rigorous technical evaluations, prove their financial stability, negotiate terms line by line.
So we are talking about thousands of pages of documentation.
Thousands.
And they are doing all of this for a contract they already hold, for a job they have already been doing perfectly well for the last decade.
That is the tragedy of it. They are essentially proving to the government that they are qualified to be the exact same company they were yesterday.
It's just an incredibly costly, completely redundant exercise.
And, the burden doesn't just fall on the private sector. Think about the government contracting officers who have to read, audit, evaluate, and award all these new contracts.
Oh man, the GSA.
Yeah. They are facing a tidal wave of manufactured redundancy. According to the sources, because of this de facto 9-year cycle, the volume of new contract offers flooding into the GSA could more than double.
Double the workload. So wait, an agency that was trying to save time by setting up a 10-year BPA has accidentally created a scenario where the central contracting officers are doing twice the amount of evaluation paperwork overall.
Exactly. It is a massive misallocation of taxpayer-funded resources.
That's insane.
Contracting officers are spending their days evaluating 500-page proposals from companies that are already fully vetted and successfully operating in the system.
Instead of focusing on finding new, innovative companies to bring in.
Right? And what does this do to the competitive landscape? Think about smaller businesses.
Yeah, if I am a specialized tech firm in year 12 of my contract, I might not have the overhead to afford a 6-month redundant proposal process.
And that is the secondary and perhaps more dangerous cost. It unduly restricts the pool of available contractors.
Because perfectly capable, highly experienced companies are locked out.
Purely because of the arbitrary timing of their original award date. When you limit competition in federal procurement, the government stops getting the best value commercial solutions. Prices go up and innovation stalls.
Which utterly defeats the entire stated purpose of the RFO in the first place. I mean, the whole point of the rewrite was to enhance competition and drive better value.
It's completely counterproductive.
If the math is this obviously broken and it's threatening to bury the GSA in redundant paperwork while locking out good companies, why not just grant simple extensions?
Well, simple extensions run into statutory limits. You can't just infinitely extend a contract that was legally awarded for a maximum of 20 years.
Oh, I see. So what is the actual structural fix?
The fix requires a structural paradigm shift, and it's actually gaining immense traction among procurement experts. It's called Evergreen contracting.
Oop, in contracting. Okay.
Yeah. Leaders like Roger Waldron from the Coalition for Common Sense in Government Procurement have been heavily advocating for this. They call it a timely and revolutionary solution to the timeline gap.
Hold on, though. Giving a defense or IT contractor an evergreen or indefinite contract, I mean, that sounds like a massive political liability.
It does sound a bit scary at first.
Right. How do you sell a never-ending government contract to taxpayers without it looking like you're breeding complacency or just handing over a permanent key to the Treasury?
It's a crucial distinction to make. Evergreen does not mean unsupervised or guaranteed forever. It is definitely not a blank check.
Okay, so how does it work then?
The core mechanism of an evergreen contract is the replacement of that rigid, fixed 20-year term limit with continuous rolling 5-year option periods.
Explain how that review process actually works, because I feel like that's the hurdle. How does the government ensure quality if the contract doesn't naturally expire?
The continuous 5-year review in an evergreen model is incredibly rigorous. It functions like a comprehensive physical for the company.
Okay, I like that analogy.
So every 5 years, the government audits the contractor's performance. They review their pricing to ensure it remains highly competitive in the current market.
They check their sales volume too.
Yes, to make sure agencies are actually using them. They audit their compliance with changing federal regulations, and they review their customer satisfaction scores.
So it's an active hurdle, not just a passive extension.
Exactly. If a contractor gets complacent, if their prices creep up, or if their technology falls behind the commercial market, they fail the review.
And then what happens?
Their contract is terminated, period.
Wow, okay.
It is arguably a much stricter performance mechanism than the current system. Right now, a mediocre company might coast for 20 years simply because they haven't hit their arbitrary expiration date yet.
That makes a lot of sense.
But, and this is the key, if the contractor is performing brilliantly, if their prices are great and agencies love their work, they pass review and the clock rolls forward another 5 years.
Okay, I see how that maintains the quality control. Now, apply that rolling clock to our mathematical glitch.
Right, the gap.
In an evergreen model, if an agency wants to award a 10-year BPA, how does the contractor prove they have 10 years left on their underlying master contract?
Because the contract is subject to continuous rolling options rather than a hard terminal end date. The contractor mathematically always has sufficient remaining runway to cover the entire 10-year span of the BPA.
So the contractual gap simply ceases to exist.
The math is fixed. The 20-year cliff disappears entirely.
Which means contractors in year 12 or year 18 of their relationship with the government are fully empowered to consistently compete for those new long-term BPAs.
Provided they just pass their recent rigorous audit, yes.
And that immediately stops the redundant cycle of rebidding.
Mm-hmm.
You eliminate the need for a company to tear up a perfectly good contract in year 9 just to reset the clock.
It's just a much smarter way to handle it.
We established earlier that our primary focus today is understanding how the shift saves massive administrative costs for both sides.
And the savings are monumental.
What does the implementation of evergreen contracts actually do for those GSA contracting officers who are about to be buried under double the paperwork?
It creates a profound philosophical and practical shift in how the government operates. The sources explicitly highlight that evergreen contracts allow both the GSA and the private contractors to shift their finite resources away from the administrative heavy lifting of awarding new contracts.
Right. Think about all those thousands of hours spent evaluating massive proposals.
Checking financial backgrounds, negotiating baseline terms for companies that are already in the system.
That entire mountain of redundancy just vanishes.
It completely vanishes.
Yeah.
And instead of spending money on the friction of awarding, both sides can focus their time, money, and personnel on the ongoing management of existing contracts.
That is a fundamental difference. I mean, awarding a contract is just clearing an administrative hurdle.
Exactly.
Managing a contract is where the actual value is generated.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure the government is getting exactly what it paid for, optimizing supply chains, integrating new tech faster.
Ensuring taxpayer dollars are being used efficiently. When you spend your energy managing rather than endlessly processing paperwork, you unleash massive cost savings.
It just sounds so much more practical.
It is. You foster a more stable, reliable pool of contractors who aren't constantly worried about timing their renewals perfectly just to stay in business.
Now, what about the transition? Did the sources talk about how we actually move to this system?
Well, advocates point out that while there isn't, a simple step-by-step transition manual for flipping the switch on thousands of existing contracts, the shift to evergreen models is universally recognized as the necessary final piece.
The final piece to complete the vision of the Revolutionary FAR Overhaul.
Yes, the RFO streamlined the ordering rules.
Mm-hmm.
Evergreen contracting streamlines the underlying contractual vehicle itself.
It really is an elegant solution. We don't need a massive new law. We don't need to rewrite the entire federal code.
Yeah, no, we just need to change the fundamental structure from a fixed expiration date to a continuous performance review.
It prevents the 9-year tryout cycle. It saves the government from drowning in duplicate evaluations.
It saves contractors millions in redundant proposal costs.
And it ultimately protects the taxpayer from footing the bill for unnecessary bureaucracy.
It highlights how one well-intentioned change in a regulation, like allowing agencies the freedom to create 10-year BPAs, can just ripple outward and destabilize an entire ecosystem.
if the foundational structure isn't updated to match.
Yeah, the 20-year fixed contract was built for a much older era of federal procurement. The Evergreen model recognizes that in a modern, fast-paced commercial economy, continuous evaluation is far more efficient and secure than arbitrary expiration dates.
It is a fascinating evolution of the system. I mean, we started this deep dive with an attempt to cut red tape, the RFO.
Which successfully slashed the rulebook by 75%.
Right, but it mathematically collided with the old 20-year contract structures, threatened to create a massive contractual gap.
And the proposed solution, Evergreen Contracts, cuts the Gordian knot.
By relying on a rigorous rolling 5-year reviews, it keeps highly capable contractors in the game and entirely removes the administrative overhead of constant recompetes.
It serves as a great reminder that sometimes the best way to fix a complex stalling system isn't to layer on more rules or grant temporary extensions,
but to fundamentally remove the artificial timeline barriers that are causing the friction in the first place.
Exactly.
Which leaves us with something to think about beyond the halls of federal procurement. We've seen today how arbitrary expiration dates can create massive hidden costs and vulnerabilities in government contracting.
It's definitely something you start seeing everywhere once you know what to look for.
Right, look at your own industry or even your personal life. How much of our modern economy is bogged down by the administrative friction of fixed-term renewals?
Oh, absolutely.
From corporate vendor agreements and annual software licenses to renewing professional certifications or, standing in line at the DMV.
Nobody wants to do that.
Nobody. If the federal government, an entity famous for its love of paperwork, is realizing that continuous, rigorous reviews are vastly more efficient than hard expiration dates, where else could an evergreen model eliminate the tyranny of the redundant recompete in our own lives? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking for those hidden systemic gaps in your own field, and we will see you next time.
If you found this video helpful, please consider donating to helpallvets.org. Thank you.